Downward dog is one of those go-to yoga poses. You'll find it in so many classes, and a lot of people struggle with it a little bit. I just wanted to unpack it a bit today and give you a few ideas that you might play with to see if you can find a little more sweetness in the shape. Now, it's a weight-bearing pose, so we want to make sure that we're looking after the shoulders when we are taking the shape. The easiest way we can start to pay attention to the shoulders and position them well is by starting in cat pose. And when we soften into the elbows rather than locking the elbows up or hyperextending the arms, creating just a little micro bend there, we can then scoop the elbow tips towards each other. And if you notice the position of your shoulder blades now, as opposed to when you really lock up the arms or hyperextend, you'll feel the shoulder blades positioned quite differently. So let's keep some softness in the elbows. And then when we lift to downward dog, tucking the toes and lifting up, what we want to try and do is maintain that softness in the elbows. Now, let's also include a little bend in the knees rather than having the legs really straight and the heels on the floor initially. You'll notice as soon as I do that, there's more of a tendency to round the back. And that's because a lot of people are quite tight, me included, in the hamstrings. So when you keep that softness in the legs, we can then lift the hips really high and lengthen out the spine. Now, a lot of people like to gaze towards their toes. A lot of people sort of lift their head and gaze beyond the top of the mat. Ideally, we want to bring the gaze into a position where you feel your neck in line with the rest of the spine. The knees a little bit soft, the elbows a little bit soft, and the heels off the mat. Remembering that when we lower the heels and straighten the legs, there's going to be more of this tendency to round the back. And this is a pose where we want to have a long spine. Now, another thing about it is that when you're holding downward dog for a little bit of time, you can really start to feel your wrists loading up with a sense of a downward moving energy into the earth. If instead, when you take the pose, you imagine energy coming out of the earth, up your arms, up the sides of the back to the sacrum, inviting a lift of energy up from the earth. You might notice that takes a little bit of pressure off the wrists. Rather than feeling like you're falling into your hands and loading up the wrists, we're inviting the energy upwards. And this also helps us put that focus on lifting the hips that little bit higher, drawing the belly into the backbone. And we'll keep broad through the collarbones as well. So I hope that gives you some ideas to play with. And of course, if that's still too strong on your wrists, another option is to take the pose with your forearms resting on the mat. So making quite a square shape in front of the body and taking the pose that way. So we're putting the pressure from the elbows to the fingertips this way. It's just another option. And people who have sore wrists or carpal tunnel syndrome can get a little bit more of a sweetness in their downward dog when they take it that way. Anyway, have a play, be a playful puppy and see what you think. And message me or leave a comment below if you want any further clarification on what I've been chatting to you about today.